This is a topic I've been mulling over in my head for a while. I've spoken to Sargon and Chud Logic about it privately, and I even floated it by Dylan Burns during his recent appearance in the Tubcast. I think at this point my ideas have crystallized enough that I can really try and figure out what exactly it is I'm feeling here. Those of you who have been watching me for a while know that I was a partisan leftoid in my youth. I was extremely socially progressive in my high school years, which in retrospect is in no small part to my being a based Yuri enjoyer. And in my early 20s, I was a full-blown communist, a period of my life that only ended after I was forced to leave the ivory tower and actually had to work a blue-collar menial job in order to survive. Nothing like a cold dose of reality to bring people back to their senses, let me tell you. But during the Dev Lefty arc, gay marriage became legal in Canada. I still have vivid memories of being a babby dev, attending gay marriage protests, and advocating for just such a political change. A decision I still ultimately agree with, despite the title of this video. I'm still pro-gay marriage, and my logic now is the same as my logic back then. But that's not to say that 15 years on, there's not some criticism we can consider. A lot of people relied on the rights argument surrounding gay marriage. The leftoids would say, gay people should have the same rights as straight people. They should be able to get married to their partner. Rightoids would reply, they do have the same rights. Gay people can get married to a member of the opposite sex, just like straight people can. And while it's a fun linguistic trick, my personal argument was never one about rights, even though I do ultimately agree with the rights argument on the side of the left. For me, the stronger argument was one of practical effects. We know that marriage is a stabilizing pro-social institution. It's a way of legitimizing your relationship and your sexual activity in the eyes of wider society. Being a husband or a wife is a status that grants people respectability. It's a social signifier that tells other people what you're about, at least in part. And it's also ultimately better for everyone involved. For example, we know that a two-parent household is significantly better for raising children than a one-parent one. Moreover, people in long-term serious relationships are absolutely better off across the board than people who are simply promiscuous. I'm not bringing poly people into this discussion because that opens up a whole other can of worms. I don't know if monogamous people are better off than successful poly people, or how often can poly actually be successful and not just collapse into meaningless promiscuity. We're just going to cut that part of the conversation out for today and focus on the difference between stable, meaningful relationships and promiscuous, no-strings-attached sex. Because really, the social purpose of marriage is to promote a type of relationship that is better for the people in the relationship, better for the people who are dependent on that relationship, like children or the elderly, and better for society as well. The perception of gay people before gay marriage came along was that they were degenerate coomers and promiscuous bug spreaders, destroying themselves with drugs, alcohol, and anonymous sex at gay bars and bathhouses. Gay marriage is a practical solution to that problem. The hypothesis is, the exclusion of gay people pushed them to the fringes of society, where out of rejection, depression, and desperation, they engaged in these self-destructive behaviors. So why don't we just bring them to the table? Let's have a conception of a positive gay relationship, just like we have one for positive straight relationships. An institution of stability and respectability that gay people can strive to be a part of. Imagine a young gay man who is about to turn 18, coming to you for advice at the crossroads of his life. One path is monogamy, a deep, meaningful relationship with a committed partner, a house and a career, and a couple of adopted kids that they raise right, becoming a pillar of their community. While the other path is exactly what I described in my monkeypox video, where gay millennial men are going to 15-man piss-guzzling orgies and giving each other STDs. Which of these two paths would you advise this young gay person to try to go down? Which of them will be more stable for society and offer him more meaning in his life in the long term? The answer is obviously the first one, and that is where the legitimacy of the gay marriage argument ultimately lies. Yeah, I get it, there's the rights thing too, but a singular focus on liberty doesn't tell you what you should do with your freedom. It only tells you that you should be free, which is why we need to appeal to values outside of liberty, like stability and respectability and meaning, to discover what gay people should be doing with the rights that they have now won. Here's the problem though. To me, it seems like gay people don't want to actually do it. They don't want to take that virtuous path. They seem to want the piss-guzzling monkeypox route. And I can back that up with some data. A series of 2020 Gallup polls produced these figures on the marital status of straight and gay Americans. 47.7% of straight Americans are in an opposite-sex marriage, while 9.6% of gay Americans are in a same-sex marriage. In fact, there are more gay people in straight marriages than in gay marriages, presumably because they're still in the closet or it's out of convenience or something. 22.9% of straight Americans are single, while 50.5% of gay Americans are single. At first glance, this tells me that gay Americans just don't care for marriage. When I brought this poll up with Dylan, he actually had some reasonable explanations. Firstly, America isn't Canada. We've had gay marriage for a long time, but as of this poll, America had only had gay marriage for around 5 years. It's entirely possible that it just hasn't been around long enough for widespread adoption. I also pointed out myself that there may be a cultural difference between older gays and younger ones, and that the teenage and 20-something gays coming up might be a lot more interested in marriage than their predecessors. Dylan agreed with this, saying that a lot of gay Zoomers, himself being one of them, are actually hoping to fall in love and get married just like the straight ones do. And personally, I think there's a good chance this is the case. A lot of the memes floating around the online gay community nowadays are pretty much mirror images of the trad GF, with trad femboys taking the place of the ideal partner. Yeah, it's still gay, but these memes emphasize not only sexual attractiveness and femininity, but also the idea of a real lasting relationship, with the implication that the intended viewer desperately wants to be in one. But there's more data to consider too. The 2013 study, a comparison of sexual behavior patterns among men who have sex with men and heterosexual men and women, showed that gay men start having sex earlier than straight men. Gay men have more partners than straight men. And while straight men's new partner acquisition declines rapidly as they age, with gay men not so much. Gay men are also more likely to report a higher age gap between themselves and their partners than straight men, and they were also 2 to 3 times more likely to have multiple partners at once. However, gay men also use condoms for anal more often than straight men use them for regular sex. So hey, at least they've got that going for them. This data seems to confirm the stereotype of gay men as being more promiscuous than average, which would definitely be a factor in whether or not a gay man decides to get married. And there's a few other papers that show a link between negative public perception of gay people and their promiscuity. In other words, people are more likely to disapprove not just of a gay individual, but gay people as a class when they encounter a promiscuous gay person. And that disapproval does impact their acceptance of gay rights. So while the stop being degenerates and get married advice seems to apply to the gays the same way it applies to the straights, as a group, they seem a whole lot less interested in actually following it. We can explore why this is the case too. I mentioned earlier that there's a cultural difference between older gays and younger gays, and I'm not entirely sure if the chicken or the egg came first. A lot of critical queer theory written by older gay political theorists revolves around just how marginalized the gay experience is. During the Stonewall era, your average gay person's experience consisted of being on the fringe of society, to the point that the only way to be gay was also to be some form of extremist, living in a society that was outwardly hostile against you. To these people, gay wasn't just an orientation, it had to be its own way of life, its own way of engaging with relationships and with politics, due to just how unaccepted being gay was. It was in this environment that a lot of the extreme and ultimately self-destructive behaviors became the norm for gay men, and the hope was that gay marriage, the seat at the table of respectable society, would bring the gay community out of the shadows. The counter-argument to that is that men are horny, hornier than women on average. In heterosexual relationships, women are overwhelmingly the gatekeepers of sex, and that dynamic doesn't exist between two men. In this view, gay men are just always going to be promiscuous, in the same way that straight men would if women as a class behaved like men sexually. And, there might be some truth to that, considering the possible link between the advent of birth control and the decline of the heterosexual marriage. You already know what my opinion is going to be, don't you? It's probably a little bit of both of these views. The second one seems to be self-evidently true. Sex is fun, and if people can get away with having it, they will. The first one, though, the idea that gay culture developed specifically to be degenerate as a reaction to the domineering straight culture, that one is a bit more interesting to explore. As being gay has become more accepted, this tendency of gay culture to be degenerate hasn't gone away, but intensified. Today's queer political theorists are writing about a concept of queer separatism, which is just like black separatism or white separatism, but for queer people. If a gay person settles down, gets married, has kids, has a career, is monogamous, is constructive and virtuous, to these people, they're no longer gay. They're acting straight, which is, again, analogous to a black person acting white. It is because gay marriage is an attempt by the wider society to introduce a positive, stabilizing institution to the gay community that the queer separatists view it as a subversion of queer culture and values. Yes, I know it sounds insane, but it's absolutely a thing. From Anna Valen's writing about queer public sex being an essential component of the queer identity, and queer radicals rejecting the reformist element, to the gay trust fund baby Carlos Maza saying that every gay guy is a socialist because they all share their husbands, to all of the kink at pride discourse, from drinking piss in public to exposing children to it, to that Sonic Fox furry guy I did a video on years ago saying that it's homophobic to say being gay is not a personality. There is a school of political theory, and a section of the LGBT community that does in fact adhere to it, which states that engaging with straight society is akin to a socialist movement compromising with the bourgeois, and that to be authentically gay is to be a radical in the rejection of all things heteronormative, like say monogamy and child rearing, even if at the end of the day they're good for you, and instead engage in the subversive practice of being as degenerate as fucking possible. The gay people today aren't the oppressed gays of old, the people who got their shit kicked out of them at Stonewall, who were actually marginalized and hated by all the common people and all the institutions of society, who were forced to create their own communities in the fringe. That era has passed. These are people who are being offered a seat at the table, and they're rejecting it because they want to own the table and they want to be the only ones sitting at it. I think this attitude is the root of that dumbfuck slogan, "Be gay, do crimes," that you often see out in the wild. They genuinely believe that in order to be gay, you must overthrow capitalism, and in order to overthrow capitalism, you must be gay, since all things that are not the norm are intrinsically linked, united in their hatred of civilization. It's a truly ridiculous way of looking at the world. I do ultimately hope that Dylan Burns is correct, that young gay people, growing up in a world where the idea of homosexual monogamy and stability is more normalized, will choose to take that option. It's better for them, and it's better for everyone else. Maybe, as the old gays age out, the ridiculous degeneracy of the gay community will be a problem that solves itself. One can only hope. But in the end, that is not the world that we currently live in. I'm still ultimately pro-gay marriage, but it might just be the case that gay marriage is an institution meant for a later age. The biggest criticism of gay marriage is that gay people right now don't seem to want it.
Hey, Nazis are tormenting Americans.
It's okay. It's gonna be okay.
Where are the adults? Where are our veterans? Where are our leaders?
Sir, she's having a
Are we being arrested? Our politicians.
Not get unarrested for panic attack.
What are
No,
they
but
doing
she's
right
having
now?
one.
Well,
Hey,
take
guys.
and
Are we being arrested?
brutalize our kids. They aren't letting this young woman have her dialysis.
She's my sister. I need to calm her down. She's having a panic attack.